good.
Yep.
And I know the initial cost is a little bit more, but the overall costs, I think, are about the same in terms of maintenance, right?
Yeah, in the long term, it's actually cheaper because the concrete or the stamped concrete doesn't last as long. So ultimately, you have it's a better economy of scale to have the bricks installed over
Oh, good.
over
And
that
it needs
long
to be
term.
sealed every 2 years.
Yeah, there's a lower maintenance associated
Oh,
with
good.
it, so.
And, you know, there's something nice happening there between Nathaniel Rogers and Topping Rose and, you know, that, the Militia Park and that whole area is, you know, it's a nice amenity for, you know, to the area in terms of historical significance. I think it's important that, it's maybe to some people it's a small detail, but I think those things matter. You're doing a militia park, it's a colonial park, everything ought to be fitting of that era, so.
Yeah, and ultimately, you know, it's a cost savings ultimately over the long term to the taxpayer, so I think it's a win-win all around. Sunday, there is an amendment to that. I'll share with you. I have it here. I'll share with you after, and we can. All right, thank you.
So the next one, 731, it changes the target area and amends the CPF management and stewardship plan. So that, you know, that's that IGHL piece. You know, if we close the record, we could vote on that. So, you know, I guess after we close that record, we can discuss this. Huh? So I can't say whether we'll be able to vote on it on Tuesday, but it's possible.
And Board Resolution ID 34765, co-sponsored with Councilwoman Lobstad, to authorize the supervisor to enter into a licensed agreement with the Bridgehampton Child Care and Recreational Center for temporary use of the Bridgehampton Community Center. Town Board Resolution ID 34785, co-sponsored with Councilwoman Lofstad, to authorize the supervisor to sign an amendment to the housing plan contract with VHB Incorporated to amend the scope of services included in the community engagement process. Town Board Resolution ID 34786 is to authorize the supervisor to sign a contract extension for electric landscaping equipment with Mean Green Products LLC, doing business as Mean Green Mowers.
34766 authorizes the supervisor to execute a contract with Civic Plus Advantage for upgrades and redesign of the town's website. The next one, 34738, is co-sponsored with Councilman Bouvier. It authorizes the supervisor to execute an intermunicipal agreement with the Village of West Hampton Beach for properties located at 74 and 76 Dune Road.
Town Board Resolution ID 34, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just looking at it. I guess it's a stewardship agreement on those parcels. All right, go ahead, John.
Town Board Resolution ID 34798, to recall and amend Resolution 2020-551, contract extension Waste Zero to supply and distribute garbage bags.
34760 authorizes the purchase of one 2020 Ford Escape SE Hybrid.
Town Board Resolution 34797. This is a 2020 request for proposals for Round Pond Stormwater Mitigation and Wetlands Restoration Project.
34748 amends the 2020 adopted budget for CPF. 34803 amends the 2020 adopted budget for the Department of Land Management Long Range Planning Division.
Town Board Resolution ID 34796 is to appoint Louise Salter to the Anti-Bias Task Force.
34736 authorizes additional funds for Devitt Spellman Barrett LLP as it relates to the matter of Fred W. Thiel Jr. et al. Versus Town of Southampton Planning Board et al. 34764 authorizes Community Preservation Fund tax refund pursuant to the first-time home buyer's exemption for Jose and Lucy Morales. 34769 authorizes September 2020 as Voices for Recovery Month within the town of Southampton in observance of National Recovery Month.
Town Board Resolution ID 34768, release performance bond and accept reduced performance bond in connection with the planned residential development cluster plan of Mill Creek Heights, also known as Sag Harbor Woods, Noyak, as it relates to road and drainage improvements.
Resolution ID 34778, release performance bond as it relates to demolition of house located at 414 Edgewood Woods Road, Watermill.
34787, 2020 standard workday and reporting resolution for appointed officials. These are, I'm seeing elected officials on this. I guess is that still correct? None of these people.
Trustees. in
None of
this
these
case.
people are appointed.
No.
Is that incorrect? There's nobody on here who's appointed.
It says elected officials on the side of the title.
Yeah, so I
It's
mean,
part of a wider,
maybe it's fine that maybe the state definition can put some in that category. Could just somebody double check that? We might just have to change the title. Yeah, all right, 34,590, 2020 part-time salaries. 34,753 accepts resignation of a maintenance mechanic 1 in municipal works. 34,767 appoints Karen Cheramonte to office assistant position in housing and community services. 34,294 appoints Shane Sharkey to fire marshal 1 position in public safety. 34,754, it's a notice of public hearing on the acquisition of lands of Riser Trust, Noyak, and amends the CPF management and stewardship plan to include the property. 34,757, notice of public hearing to consider the acquisition of lands of Hampton Valley Associate, East Quogue, and amend CPF management and stewardship plan to include that property. And then you have that one other addition, 34, John, this is yours, 34,804, you want to read it?
Sure. 34804 is to authorize the supervisor to sign a contract to fund additional scope for West Shinnecock Bay feasibility study.
And just, so you want to do a brief explanation on what this is?
Yeah, we had a contract with, we had enjoyed the benefit of the state doing a study for us for water quality in Western Shinnecock Bay Complex, and that's been ongoing for some time. We've had that published. It's on the website. And there was a fourth alternative that we wanted to add into that to make the study complete, and also as a resource for future water quality projects, because it's got some really great metrics in it and a lot of really good data. And that's going to be, it was an additional cost of $50,000 roughly that we wanted to add to that. We felt it was really important to do that. We had to move a little quickly because the contract is more immediate. It's a state contract with Dewberry to do that work. And we've been part of that for quite some time now. So we want to get the study closed with the fourth alternative.
Yeah, because the state has invested a significant amount of economic resources into this analysis of water quality in Shinnecock Bay. I think they're at like maybe over $1 million.
It's close to, yeah.
Or close to $1 million, but it didn't include funding for what looked like a very promising possible fourth alternative, so we'd like to explore that as well. And because the state authorization doesn't have the funding, it's relatively small in the context of the entire study to get that possibility looked at, carefully through the technical professionals.
Yeah, and to look at it as a more comprehensive set of data that we use in order to make determinations into the coming years, this is a great resource for us. So it made a lot of sense to add that fourth alternative.
And it's funded through the water quality.
It is.
The CPF, 20%.
Well, that's what we're asking for.
Right. Okay, so any questions about the agenda? Is everybody okay with having Sunday publish it? Just that one issue that came up,
I'll check on that.
possibly appointed versus elected in the title. Okay,
I do have something. Sunday, I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor to ID number 34294. This is the Fire Marshal 1 position,
Could you please tell me what page that's on?
page 20. And on page 3, 2020-731, I'd like to be added as a
I'm sorry,
co-sponsor.
just one second.
Oh,
Page 20, appointing the fire marshal?
Yes.
Correct?
yes.
The other?
And page 3,
Very good.
731,
Page
3.
3.
3, sorry.
Very good.
We were on a roll, so.
Okay, 3. 731. Got it.
Thank you.
All right, so let's just, so you're good, Sunday, on that, and then we can do some updates. Three of us just got back from a rally out in the county center in Riverside. That was to promote people doing filling out the census. It's so important. Councilman Scavone has been very vocal on this issue. We all need to be vocal. Councilman Martell was there, myself, Fred Thiel came, Assemblyman Thiel, and also County Executive Steve Malone was there, as well as the supervisors from Riverhead and Southold, Supervisor Yvette Aguirre and Scott Russell from Southold, Yvette's Riverhead. And, everybody pretty much said, I would say, the same things. It takes 10 minutes, it's easy to do, and it's super important, because if you don't get counted, we have, federal and state agencies that underestimate our population and don't give us the adequate resources we need to keep everybody safe, to provide the services that are needed for our communities. And I had said, keeping people safe is one of the most important things that we do. And if we don't have an accurate count, it's how do we scale our resources to be able to have the right amount of police officers or code enforcement officers or emergency service personnel? How do we do that? 10 minutes makes a big difference. So my point was that based on the current participation in the census, it makes it look like our population is half of what it was 10 years ago, when the reality is, at the moment, because of the pandemic, we're probably double. We probably have twice as many people, and we're going to be evaluated as having half as many people. So we'll have more expenses, more people to provide for, and less resources to do that on the federal and state level. So that's not good. If you care about people and making sure that their needs are met and that they're safe and they have adequate services, we're going to find ourselves in a very difficult position if we don't get those numbers up. So, I don't want to be the only one to speak on this, because I know everybody cares about it, but Tommy John, do you want to add to that?
Sure. In addition to the funding aspect of this, for so many reasons, from fire districts to senior citizens to schools, school lunches, town government, county government, is also the concept of redistricting. Here on the East End, I know a lot of people, before COVID, a lot of people have been moving out to the Twin Forks, and our population is rising. And as far as redistricting, which happens every 10 years in Albany, they're going to redraw our assembly districts, our senate districts, they're going to redraw our county legislative districts. And currently, we have 2 county legislative districts, from Shoreham and Santa Maricha's East. That's just one example. We have a lot of people who live out here. We have a lot of people who have second homes out here. And filling out the census accurately counts those folks so that they can be represented properly. If we don't fill out the census, our boundary lines will be moved farther west. It's a governmental thing, but it's...
So it's really easy. It's so easy. Just go to www.my2020census.gov.
Can I say one thing on this, of the census? Because you talk about the second homeowners, and we have quite a bit of our population in the summer when it almost quadruples. And we still need to provide those services,
We
but
do.
they're not counted in this census.
No.
And it really seems as if the formula for counting should take into an account that when you fill out the census, if that's your second home, it's a 0. at that household.
Well, you're
in
supposed to be
reality,
where
it's
you're
not.
living in April. In April, that's how they do it.
Yeah.
Where are you living in April? In this year, in April, we had double our population in April. I mean, all those summer homes, to be accurate in the census, they should put this address. And a lot of the people now have put their kids in local schools. They have stayed. So there is an increase in our population, and we're seeing it at our beaches, which costs money to run and maintain and to staff. We're seeing it in calls into the police department, crime rates. We have a larger population, and there is a direct expense, and it ought to be in this census. And if you were there in April, you should be, when you do your census, not putting your New York City address, but your Hamptons address in that. It's important.
No, I agree. It just-
But
And
to
it
Sunday's
lasts for-
point, I think that there should be somewhere on there, although my primary address is in New York City in regular times, but I do spend 3 months of the year at this address.
Because
I
they
think
may
it
have
should
had
be
their
accounted
houses
somehow.
rented out in April, and then they moved in May, and now their kids are in our schools.
Supposed to
So-
be where you're living in April.
Right, but in our summer season, we need to provide services for at least 3 times our regular population, and it just seems we should get some sort of,
We should.
They still use our
Just my
police,
opinion, just-
our
I
fire
think
departments, our
For 6,
ambulance.
7 months, we've had a population of, my guess is 200,000 people.
our infrastructure.
Not
issues.
50,000, not 60,000, 200,000 people. And it's impacting us all. We're wiped out,
Well, and our
constituents
services are being
calls.
burdened
And our services
tremendously.
are mainly volunteer. Our
Yeah.
fire departments and our ambulances.
And we've gotten no federal money whatsoever, which I'll talk about next, but I wanted to let you guys finish on the census issue, if anybody else wanted to say anything.
Just one last thing, that it lasts 10 years. So the numbers that get reported this year in the census are factored into all these financial aid calculations for the next decade. That's
I just add one other thing, is that I had a conversation with a census official, they're talking about, because we have the technology to conduct these censi, I don't know what the plural is for census, but they're looking at potentially doing it, or it's being offered to do the census every 5 years instead of 10, because the change in demographics in the United States, people are moving a lot more than they ever have. So, that's an additional thing to be faced with,
Yeah.
coming up, so,
Yeah, a lot of new registered voters, too.
yeah.
A lot. A lot of new people registered to the local schools. A lot. I mean, that has to get counted. The schools need that, those funds to educate those kids. Rick, did you want to say anything? You were there, too.
Yeah, I just want to say the rally was great. It was a terrific turnout, but it's almost like preaching to the choir sometime. Everybody there, we've already done our census. So it's up to us now. We need to, it's 10 minutes to take care of the next 10 years. We have to tell 10 people, send out 10 tweets, 10 Facebook posts, 10 Instagram posts. Let's start reminding everybody, and let's get it done. It's only 13 days left.
Yeah, I mean, somebody might be watching us on their computer or on CTV, and if you haven't filled out that census, go to that website. I'll say it again. www.my2020census.gov. 10 minutes.
And we all
Time
sit
well
on
spent.
board, on committees also, like we've tasked the anti-bias task force that I happen to sit on to reach out to their community and the advocacy groups to, there's certain portions of the population that are reluctant to participate for various reasons, and so they have the ability to go into some communities to help do that. And we all sit on boards and groups in one way or another where we can get the word out, so.
I think we've
And you only
done,
have 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks.
we've done a terrific job, I think, getting the word out. I mean, anywhere you look, every one of our emails, the churches have all been notified, the schools are working hard on it. I think we've done a great job,
Yeah.
but we're still a little low on turnout, so we
Yeah.
can use another 15 or so percentage points. That'd be great.
Yeah, so much
The
of.
goal.
So much of what we do, what we think of as community services, are dependent upon how much resource we get, and that goes back to the count. And I want to kind of pivot a little bit and talk about that, because the COVID pandemic has led to a lot of issues at different levels of government, because revenue shortfalls at the town, and my recommended budget's coming out soon, but, you know, our building permit revenue is way down, our court fees, you know, justice court fees are way down. We have many areas where our revenues have dropped significantly. You know, property tax is our main source of revenue. For other entities, like the county, which is mainly a sales tax-driven county or funded county, sales tax has collapsed. I mean, it's terrible. It's terrible in terms of their revenues, and, you know, the county executive's budget's coming out, and I don't know how we are going to fare with some of the county monies that we get, like for our police. Right now, we get about $3 million from the county to help provide police services. That's a big chunk of the police budget. Reductions in those types of things could really hurt our senior nutrition programs. And we're going to be opening up a new, you know, program out in West Hampton. You know, that funding is, you know, state funding goes through the county, it passes through to us, public transportation funds. You know, we talk about the, you know, the commuter connection in our shuttle. That's all state funded. If there are cutbacks in those areas, it's going to have, you know, we're either going to have to not provide these services, reduce these services, or figure out another way to fund them. This is all coming. This is all coming. If there is not a federal relief package that includes municipalities, including the county and the state and the towns, it's going to get very difficult. It's, you know, and I know this is a bit of a severe warning. You know, I'm putting together this budget. We have a significant amount of outside funding that comes in that allows us to keep taxes where they are. If we don't get that funding, and I'm hearing from the state, they're going to pull back at least 20% on assistance to municipalities. They're holding back the funding we get there. CHIPS money, they're holding back, you know, the highway money, 20%. It might be worse, it might be even greater cutback. So this is no joke. This is really serious. This pandemic is having broad economic consequence. The first stimulus, the CARES Act, was critical. It kept a lot of people funded, you know, in terms of employees and businesses that got the PPP money, the Payroll Protection Plan money. A lot of employees were able to get that $600 additional amount in their unemployment checks. That's gone. And we are waiting now for the federal government to help. And without it, it's going to be real dire. And, you know, I went up Monday to join colleagues up in Smithtown. We had other South Fork reps, including Assemblyman Thiel was there, Supervisor Aguiar from Riverhead, and Congressman Zeldin held a press conference. And this is not partisan, this is bipartisan. Everybody is asking, this is desperate. We need some federal relief. We've all been hit by this pandemic. We have a lot of police costs, a lot of costs associated from it.
We have a lot of costs in municipal waste, too.
Municipal
which is a
waste,
huge,
parks.
Huge.
We have loss of revenues. There's a significant consequence. Some levels of government more than others, but significant for the town of Southampton. We need these monies to come through. And, you know, if these other entities, the state or county, because they're not getting the federal stimulus, can't give us the money that we've relied on, it's going to have an even greater impact on us. So we're all hoping that there's some package that comes out of Washington that has significant levels of funding for this pandemic, for relief for this pandemic. I'm hearing, you know, there's good things, there's talk, both sides, the president, the Congress, the Senate, but the clock is ticking here. So,
But in the meantime, we have these very real costs that we have to account for. You know, and I keep
Yeah.
coming back to municipal waste, where, you know, we were going to have to increase our And one of our things here is we're going to have to increase our costs just to be cost neutral because of the increase in waste and trying to
Waste
manage
disposal,
that.
yeah. I mean, look around Town Hall. I mean, we've got plexiglass everywhere. We've got temperature, scanners. I mean, everything costs money. We've had to do everything differently. In the Parks Department,
Yep.
oh my God, they're overwhelmed. And we're actually keeping the parks open longer this year so that we can have some lifeguards at some of these beaches because our population is so high and people need outdoor recreation. So we've got a few beaches that would not have lifeguards, wouldn't have attendance on the weekends. But
No,
they
and
do.
we budgeted for a season that ends typically at Labor
After
Day.
Labor Day, yeah.
And we're continuing that on, so that those stressors are just going to get bigger and bigger as we go farther and farther
Our
into the fall.
dispatch call volumes, which, then you end up with overtime costs, because we don't have enough personnel to cover it unless we bring people back who are supposed to be home, having downtime. Now we got to bring them in and we got to pay them overtime because we don't have enough people to deal with the volume of calls we're seeing. So, we're doing, my budget's coming out soon. Proposed, recommended budget. It'll be your budget next. You guys will take a look at it. We'll present and we'll explain it. And we're doing the best we can. There's a lot of unknowns. Budgeting is just forecasting and we do our best. But if this population is going to continue to be so high, we don't know how long it's going to be so high, whether people are going to go back to New York.
If there's going to be a second wave.
I haven't added staff in general, new positions. If we're going to keep having this many people, we probably have to. But, these are things you have to, I don't have a crystal ball. I have to, make predictions based on the best data sets that we have available and move forward.
Now, that's a difficult projection to make, given the circumstances.
Well, there's a lot of circumstances, though. It's not just COVID. It's everything related to COVID all across the board.
Yeah. Right, like if there is a cutback in the county contribution for our police, that's significant. It's going to have a significant impact. Either we'll have to increase taxes to cover it, or we'll have to use some reserves, until the federal money comes through, which hopefully does. In which case, then the county budget will then be normalized, and we won't have issues. But it's going to be tough. And Dr. Fauci is saying, vaccines probably not going to be this year. It might be third quarter next year.
That's what he said.
Yeah, that's the head of the CDC said that.
So
Redland.
we all want this pandemic to be behind us. All right, we want life to go back to normal. But
And this isn't just going to affect us, too. It's going to affect the villages within the town as well as the school districts, too.
Yep.
They're all looking at 20% cuts, and that's going to further drive down the economy on Long Island and across the state and country. I mean, really, everybody's facing this, and
and coronavirus is still here. You see it in the numbers every day. In the county, it's another 60 people or so. I talked to the hospital. They still have COVID patients here. I was hoping they'd have no patients, but they do. Depends on the day. It could be 1, 2, or 3. It's here, folks. It's still in our community. It's in Hampton Bays. It's in Flanders. It's in West Hampton. It's in Southampton Village.
And it's showing it up in some of our schools.
It's everywhere. Everybody's going indoors now. It's getting colder. Schools are open. And don't be surprised to see a resurgence, so it's definitely not time to let your guard down. We're all trying to get through, we're all trying to keep safe, and we've all been, I think, pretty disciplined about social distancing and mask wearing, but, we need to keep it up.
this is New York. We know that works.
Yep,
Yep,
good point.
so, all right, what else? I have a note here that, Parks Department is, even though we reduced things to 50%, they have seen overall an increase in terms of park usage, particularly, the seasonal parking passes. That's a reflection on the additional amount of people here, across the board, whether it's boat launch ramps, park uses in general has been up. Well, at some point, we'll bring Kristen in, but she's been very busy. Kristen Doulos is our Parks Director and doing a phenomenal job. People really, they've discovered our parks. They needed, to go for a walk in the woods or whatever, and, the trails have been well-maintained. Even after, the storm that knocked down so many trees, everybody's doing their part to make it so that people can enjoy the outdoors. So, because it's safer to be outdoors with the pandemic
It is.
than indoors. But, Kristen deserves a great deal of support and respect for the work that she's been doing there.
I agree. It's, she's done a phenomenal, and had a phenomenally even attitude going through all this, so I really appreciate her.
Yeah, and everybody has, our senior programs, they keep delivering the meals to people, and I'm really proud of all of the town employees and all of the town's department heads. Who would have thought Southampton would be in a 7-month state of emergency now? 7 months. I'm still signing these executive orders. Janice keeps producing. I signed it, another 8 times today, because the restaurant relief is a 5-day thing, that allows the outdoor dining. And what was the other one? The beach parking regulations. I don't think you guys need to act on either of those, because they will end soon. We won't need beach parking restrictions, I don't believe, past Columbus Day. And I don't think the restaurant thing, once outdoor dining, once the end of November. So I don't think we need to do a code amendment on those things like we did with the building permit extensions. But, everybody's working hard. We're working really hard. And I'm really proud of everyone for pulling together. But unfortunately, I can't say we're on the other side of this. All right, other updates?
Not an update, but this week, all 7 of our villages held elections this week. 2 of our villages had contested election. The village of Southampton and the village of North Haven had contested elections, and I want to thank everybody for running.
Yeah.
Important.
And congratulations to all the victors. Gina Resta in the village, and Joe McLaughlin will be new village trustees. And
Terry Dietz in North Haven.
what's the name again?
Terry Dietz,
Dietz.
D-I-A.
And, Jerry Larson in East Hampton Village won the mayor there. He's a former police chief there, outside of the town of Southampton. But I'm chair of the Supervisors and Mayors Association for the East End, so I'll have some new people at the table. And we've been meeting online. Normally that association meets every 2 months, and we usually have a lunch, and I try to discuss regional topics and bring in expertise, and it's been great. But during the pandemic, we've been meeting every 2 weeks online via Zoom. And this last meeting we had, Verizon came in to talk about cell service, which is a big issue out here. They said they're actually making major improvements to cell communication in North Sea and in Wainscott area. That may affect Sagaponack area. But they're saying significant improvements to cell service, at least in some of the zones. And I think Altice is coming to our next meeting, and I know they've been rolling out fiber in different areas, trying to improve broadband, the internet services. That's been normally I don't get a lot of complaints. I do about cell phones, but cell phone service, being spotty. This year, it's been a tremendous amount of complaints, but also about the internet, because
Kids,
everybody's working from home, and
Yeah.
kids
Bandwidth
are
is
remote
being
learning.
filled, but they're working pretty quickly. They were supposed to, I mean, they had published that they were going to be done by the end of August. And they're still working on it. I don't know. I've gotten some inquiries about that. I don't have a specific.
Saw 'em
It's
this
a little
morning.
bit hard, I think, for them to make those kinds of predictions, but they're moving pretty fast forward. So I know in the western part of town where they've gone in, services gotten good for residents. They benefit from that. But in the
Yep.
meantime, the bandwidth has been all taken up, so it's been very sporadic.
I know they've been splitting nodes and things like that and running new fiber
Yep.
optics, so hopefully people are noticing some improvement there.
Western, yes, it seems to be that way, but, they're still in process. They'd hoped, I think, at least according to the deputy supervisor, that they'd hoped to be done by the end of August. But
The other.
things don't always go quite as planned, so.
The other topic that came up at the AFD meeting, or other presentation, I mean, not at the AFD meeting, that's Freudian, because I'm going to bring up AFD. At the supervisors and mayors meeting, we also had a presentation from Claudia Pilato, who's the director of AFD. And she thanked us for kind of kickstarting with that $150,000 grant that we provided for the food pantries. AFD had set a goal of raising $1 million for addressing food insecurity, and they hit it. They've crossed the $1 million mark.
Wow.
Crossed the $1 million mark. Really, really exciting. Connie, are they going to make a public announcement, or I just did it? So it's a big deal, and we had sort of a conversation with the mayors and supervisors. Everybody seemed to think that it's really important to have an organization like AFD out there that, like a community foundation that can address social service needs throughout, our region, being, the North and South Fork and Riverhead. And, our hope is that AFD continues, maybe changes its mission to go beyond just food insecurity. I think the food insecurity isn't going away. I think that there's going to be a lot of people still who are underemployed or unemployed and don't have the financial resources to put enough food on the table.
Can I tell you that I went past a church in Flanders probably 3 weeks ago, so we're 6 months into COVID? There was the line out the door.
That's the Blaze Church?
No,
Or the
it's
other
down
one?
on the right-hand side by McDonald's.
Because I know they've been doing a great
Yeah,
job, too.
I
They're
mean,
always
I just
full.
happened to be going by, but there were still a lot of people online waiting for food,
Yep.
So I definitely think you're right, it's going to be ongoing.
I think it's going to be ongoing. So I did discuss, we have some funds, the Supervisors Association, many, many years ago, and it wasn't actually the Supervisors Association, it was something called the East End Economic and Environmental Institute. And it existed many years ago, still technically exists. And it was, I think, 3 of the supervisors from the East End, I think Riverhead, Southampton, and maybe Southold. No, it was all, it was also East Hampton too. I think it was all five East End supervisors. And then there was a member of it, I think the Wine Council and the Farm Bureau. There were some other seats for different people. It was set up, I think, initially by Governor Cuomo, not Andrew, but Mario, and it became this institute. They actually put out that book, Blueprint for the Future, if you remember that. It was sort of a guide for the future. They did some good things. It got funded after the Long Island landfill law. There was fees that were levied against the town of Southampton and East Hampton for not sealing their landfills in time, and maybe some of the other communities. And those fees from the DEC were put into a fund at this Economic and Environmental Institute, which I am the chair of the Supervisors Association, so I am now the only one who can release money from that fund. And that fund has $173,000 in money from the past, except it's not so easy to get rid of. because it has to be approved by the state attorney general, it has to be approved by the DEC, and so for years, it's just been sitting there. So I've asked Assemblyman Thiel and the group of the supervisors, said, what about giving that money to AFTI? So that, help them maybe with administrative support, help them maybe so they can, have a professional, full or part-time administrator, and maybe expand the functions of the organization. And I would say that everybody liked the idea. They liked the idea. So that's, it's sort of like the grant we gave to kickstart AFTI. This would be like sort of a grant to kickstart the next phase of AFTI. So I've asked Assemblyman Thiel to assist. Kathleen Murray has already done quite a bit of work in terms of what's involved in releasing these monies. But, I would love to, this money's been sitting there for 20 years now, or more, in just in a bank account, earning no interest,
No interest?
or whatever you get in the bank.
0.0005.
Virtually no interest.
Oh, my.
The bank is earning interest.
So it's,
Yeah.
and we file every year, we've been doing it through the Comptroller's Office, we file the IRS income, the filings for the not-for-profit. This East End Economic and Environmental Institute is a not-for-profit. So I'm hoping that we're able to get that money released and give it to AFTI and close that account. But Connie's been working very closely with AFTI. I know, Connie, do you want to say a word, anything about AFTI? If you do, you're going to have to come here, because we won't be able to see or hear you. Connie, you're on the board there?
I am, yes, I am. I'm one of the board members. I'm the secretary to the board. I think you pretty much summed it up. As much as we've been working hard to reach that $1 million goal, we're also thinking about setting a new goal for another $1 million. But this is all, something that we're going to go back to our original sponsors and ask for them to think in terms of the pandemic continuing and how much a need, again, it might be this winter, to keep the food pantries active. And we're doing our research, and the pantries have really plateaued. They've really hit a very high mark, and they continue to support that mark. So it's still
It's sort of
very
like a-
dramatic.
Is that plateau at like 4 times the level that they used to?
Exactly, 4 to 5 times what they normally saw.
And there's an issue with the food programs, too, that children don't have access to those, so that has a reverse burden on families
Right.
that work
Exactly.
in that kind of situation. So I applaud that. I think it's a great idea.
And after, you guys, were you guys involved, or was it the Lions Club with the freezers and refrigerators?
Right, we reached out to the Lions Club to ask them for help, and the town was very generous in offering us the space at the Bridgehampton Community Center. And so through that partnership, it really, it has solved the need for 3 nearby pantries that are actually now with refrigerator space and freezer space. Because, we have the food banks offering some food, and they did not have the supply areas where they could actually store it. So between, Long Island Harvest, we were, offered these bigger foundations of food, but we really, those 3 food pantries had just small refrigerators. So this is really, these are the big, industrial-sized refrigerators, and those 3 pantries are actively using them. So it's really been very good. A really
Thank
nice
you.
partnership.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you have to update us on?
The AFTI organization really wants to look for other, social ills too, that, we might be, helping in terms of rent or utilities, and people are really struggling.
All right, thank you, Connie.
So depending on what the federal government does in terms of a new, care package, we know that we're in it for the long haul.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Any other updates from anyone? All right, we have some executive session things to talk about. Let me go back to my agenda. So we have CPF acquisitions, personnel matters, and litigation, settlement potentially to discuss. So I'd like to make a motion to end our work session and go into executive session on those items.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Bouvier. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We